Hello and welcome to Light Talk. This is Stan, and I'm broadcasting from my state-of-the-art studio in the swamps of rainy Gainesville, Florida today.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas.
And this is David in Boca Raton, Florida, and we are the Lumen Brothers. So today we promised that we were going to talk a little bit about the Olympics, at least the closing ceremonies. What do you think, Steve? Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I think, you saw a ton of very complex media being thrown at that show. And you saw, Pearl River fixtures all around the auditorium lighting it up. I have some ideas about content that I'm happy to chime in on a little bit. But I think overall it was, a technological kind of success for South Korea.
Absolutely. We watched the opening ceremonies, which was, about 2 weeks ago, and we actually watched it together as a class, and we reviewed the lighting and the content. And okay, so I'm going to be really honest. I was not impressed with the opening ceremonies. Yes, I mean, the drones were beautiful doing the Olympic, the rings and all that. And I thought that the beginning was put together really well. But there were things I didn't think that worked as well as they were hoping. First of all, let's just say right now that the projections were amazing. They really were. Steve went ahead and posted this great article from Live Design about how they were done. We can go on and on about the technical elements. It would take the whole show to do that. So we would rather you guys just check out, go on to our Light Talk Facebook page and check it out there. It was beautifully done, no doubt about it. But the one thing I did not like about it was the use of the follow spots, because the follow spots seemed to wipe out most of the projections. And we were, as a class, we were watching it and thinking, well, couldn't they have embedded some lights inside, some of these trucks that they were using and things like that? But that looked a little kind of rough to me. But I must say, overall, I was a little disappointed with the opening. Now, as disappointed that I was with the opening ceremonies, I was personally blown away by the closing ceremonies. And I'm talking about content, and I'm talking about the projections that were used, the lighting, the costumes, the LED, the use of LED in the costumes, and it looked like fiber optic to me. I'm not sure exactly, but it was quite beautiful. And that whole section with all the different instruments, the mix of the traditional instruments and the electronic instruments, the guitar player, and it just seemed to be much more together. And I have a theory. And again, I don't know this for a fact. I have a theory why the closing ceremonies seem to be much more together and solid than the opening ceremonies. I really think that they had a lot more rehearsal time on the closing ceremonies. Because if you think about it, once the opening ceremonies happened, they had like 13 or 14 days and nights, actually evenings, to really work out all the bugs. Again, I'm guessing, but I think they learned a lot from the opening ceremonies that made the closing ceremonies better. What do you think, Steve?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think there were 4 Olympics that had much stronger opening and closing ceremonies. And I'm going to say Lillehammer.
Oh, yeah.
In 1994, because you had this great Norwegian kind of tip of the hat to all the trolls that run around the country. Athens in 2004, you have the flying gods over the processional. Mm-hmm. London in 2012, I thought was pretty spectacular. And I'm still very impressed by Beijing in 2008. The thing I didn't like about South Korea was I thought the media and the projection overwhelmed the humanity of the opening and closing ceremonies. It was just, it was like a firework display coming at me. And the performers, with the exception of that really kind of 2 rocking K-pop bands at the closing ceremonies, I think the people who were on stage didn't need to be there. I could just look at the projections and there was no sense of humanity about it, which brings me to when the Olympic flag is handed over to the mayor of Beijing. And China did their 4 or 5 minute tip of the hat, and we see the pandas, we see those floating screens on stage. I really like that because all of a sudden the human element was back in it again, and I didn't feel that the projections were overwhelming the performance underneath it. So we're at that funny world right now. We talked about this with virtual reality last week. We're kind of at that funny world where technology, we got to be careful with it because it can do anything we want it to do.
Exactly, which brings us to augmented reality. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's their technology that they introduced in these Olympics, and they actually called it and promote it as augmented reality when they actually CGI over the top of the real of the real event. And again, you can read about it in that terrific article that Steve posted on the Light Talk Facebook group page. But augmented reality was CGI'd basically, and the only people who saw it were people at home watching it on TV, and also the people in the stadium that were watching it on the monitors. And I really question that. I really do. I just think that I don't know. What do you guys think about augmented reality? Do you think it should be a place in a live performance?
Is this connected to like the Super Bowl question that we're still pondering?
Well, we're still pondering that. I don't know if that's augmented reality or not, but this is actually, and on the screen, on the broadcast, they say this is augmented reality, which I give them credit for.
There were some really nice moments in that opening, and they said this is augmented reality. So you think, oh, wow, this is pretty spectacular. And then you go, oh, it's CGI. Well,
right.
Yeah, I guess it was spectacular. So again, that's a slippery slope, I think.
Yeah, my students didn't like it at all. I must tell you, and I'm talking about, my grad students, when they announced, well, this is, what you're seeing now is actually augmented reality. And my students looked at each other, we all looked at each other, well, what is that? But we knew what it was, and it had to do with CGI.
I have a thought about it. So I'm just kind of in my mind now as I'm listening to this conversation. So basically, David, I think, are you objecting to the idea that only certain audience members sees it, or you only see it on the screen and you don't see it in the three-dimensional world? Let me just, if that's what you're saying, I'm connecting it to the, Hollywood for a long time has been trying to do these 3D movies, glasses, basically messing with your vision to give you this three-dimensional experience. And I had a friend who was pretty knowledgeable about this stuff, and he said, it's really sort of silly because your brain makes three-dimensional vision possible because you have binocular vision, and then your visual cortex puts together two flat. You don't see in 3D; you see two flat images. Your retina's flat, right? And then it takes that information and it creates 3D. So when you start to try and do that glasses thing, right, you're sort of working against your body's own biology by trying to take a 2D image, which is the movie, and make it 3D. I guess the goggles is a sort of a different style of that, and they work better. But I guess if you're asking, should you or shouldn't you sort of use these tools? I don't know. Like I'm with Steve. It's a slippery slope. I'm curious, like, where is it going?
Yeah, me too. I don't know what to think about it. I just didn't like it, to tell you the truth. And I don't know why. Again, maybe I'm just a traditionalist that we all know this is a live show. We also know that it's also being broadcast to millions and millions of people. So I don't know. And I think they probably had debates about this, amongst the production teams and the producers and the television network and all that. Why else would they identify it very specifically when it happened? This is augmented reality, It's like, what is this, something new? I don't know.
Yeah, we have to be honest and say we're doing a fakery thing.
Yeah, but they didn't do it in the Super Bowl, which again, we still don't have an answer, by the way, for the Prince. Don't. And I still think that it may have been partially drawn in, maybe. But I don't know. But then again, that's a whole other thing. I do want to mention one more thing about the Olympics. First of all, these projectors, these amazing 30K Panasonic projectors they used, were pretty cool and pretty powerful. Again, they're coming at a very shallow angle. I think it was like 15 degrees. But the way they were mapped was almost seamless. And I one particular spot was when they were doing the Vivaldi Four Seasons and are doing winter. It was so beautiful. And that's one spot where I thought that there was a little humanity on stage, that we did see the dancers and the movement that worked with the technology. I thought that was one real prime moment. So again, I thought they did a great job, and go check it out on the website. And if you haven't seen it, you can probably see it at nbc.com. I like that for a promo for NBC.
NBC.com. I'll have to check that out.
So Steve, you have our first listener question.
Yes, we have a question from Martin. He doesn't say where he is. And his question is, I'm trying to design lighting for my university, and the chair wants a proposal. Any suggestions on how to put a proposal together? Well, Martin, designing a show clearly is a big responsibility, and I think your chair simply needs some information from you. And I would think in this proposal, the first thing is, do you have a faculty mentor who is willing to work with you? And that faculty mentor, either in writing to the chair or in a face-to-face meeting, can also address the second major issue is, are you ready to tackle a fully produced work? And also to discuss what is the backup plan if you get in over your head. So I think in this proposal, you're going to need a faculty designer who's willing to oversee your work. You're going to need a director who is willing to work with you. You need to come up with a schedule outlining your time commitment, deadlines, and budgets. You're going to need to identify the resources you're going to need. And again, your faculty advisor can help you lay all this out. And finally, you need to get a reasonable set of deadlines and goals to meet the work that you're going to have to do on the show. And if this is for a class, what does your teacher expect of you? And how are you going to be scored? So the chair just wants to know, I suspect, that you have thought this through, your faculty advisor has thought this through, and this is a good idea for you to tackle the show. And so these are just a few simple things, a few simple questions that I think can be answered, and probably they'll release a show to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great training, to tell you the truth, for the future in the profession. When you do want to sell a show or you want to sell a project, you have to go through the same steps.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts here. I'm thinking about this, reading into Martin's situation. I am guessing, and I could be wrong, that in his program, and I by the way, I agree with everything that David and Steve have said so far, but I'm taking a guess that maybe students are not typically given designs in this program, and that the faculty design. I've been in places like that, and I have a story from my own life where the guy that I worked as a staff member, and there was one man who did all the designs, the scenery and the lighting, and I really wanted to design. And they were like, well, we don't really let students design here. And so I lobbied, and eventually I got the design. And like Steve said, I didn't do what Steve suggested. I was too hot to do it. I didn't really organize myself, and I was sort of in pretty deep. And I probably did not do as well as I probably could have had I invited more help and mentoring from the person who was the designer. So I'm guessing that that's the situation. So I think you really do want to, sometimes we think we're more capable than we are, but when we're so passionate about doing it. So I think Steve's suggestion is good, and I don't know whether or not it would be a new thing at your place. And in terms of proposals, absolutely. What David is saying is right. I mean, I've done 2 this weekend for big projects that I have to put together a package and push it out, and then there's a lot involved in that. So I think those are 2 really good pieces of advice. Danny in Alabama wants to know, hey, I just celebrated my 30th birthday. Have I started to, first of all, happy birthday. And have I started to.
From the Lumen Brothers.
Yeah, the Lumen Brothers, which we think, birthday. So if you're 30, just think about it a little bit. You're actually beginning your 31st year.
That's right. And you're half the age of any one of us. So.
That's right. You're about halfway. So don't worry. Don't worry. You still have more days ahead of you than you have behind you. I can't say that for us. So, but he asks, have I started too late in building my network? So just a quick joke. So I don't think the Ethernet cable or the routers really care about your age. But seriously, no, I don't think it matters. But I will say that probably the people that you were working with when you were 20 or 25, you should certainly embrace them because they will become your network. I mean, I watched David and Paul work, and they have 15 years of history. So people that you have worked with over time, those bonds strengthen. So I think that is important. But 30 is not really that old. You may view it that way, but I went back to grad school at 29, and I had a sort of a network at home, and then I built a larger network starting at 29. So, and I think the three of us would admit that we're still making friends and building networks. That's sort of an ongoing part of your life. So I wouldn't worry about that too much.
Well, I agree. I mean, 30 is actually young. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of grad students, they don't get out until they're like 25, 26 sometimes. Mm-hmm. I had graduate students in their 30s and sometimes in their 40s. Mm-hmm. I think that if you have the passion, it doesn't matter. Just do it.
Yeah. Just keep working. Just keep meeting people. Just keep, if you like people and you enjoy company, like the three of us, most days, we love having this show. We talk to each other. We're friends. Just keep that up. I mean, there's no regrets there. Just keep moving forward.
Cool. Hey, Bob in New Jersey says, I have 12 Kliegl 6-inch Fresnels, and they work fine, but I just can't find any information about the company. They look really old.
Hey, I'll match. I will match Bob and raise him 12 8-inch Kliegl Fresnels we were joking about that today at school as we were showing somebody around and saying, there's some fixtures in here that I think are older than me. And their name is Kliegl. So,
well, okay.
So actually, I think you can find information. Actually, I wonder if Bob has actually just Googled Kliegl documentation. In fact, I think, didn't you post a link to a whole page about Kliegl equipment?
No, I didn't.
There is one.
Well, I guess we're about ready to post the page.
There is all things Kliegl webpage.
All right. Well, let's just give them a basic knowledge of what Kliegl is and how they started and all that. Actually, the company started in 1896, and I think that they are the oldest American lighting company, stage lighting company. And I'm sure Bob has heard the term Klieg light. You guys remember the Klieg light? Klieg light was made by Kliegl, and there were actually two different types of Klieg lights. Right now, by the way, Stan and Steve's heads are exploding because they didn't think I did any research on this question.
Okay, let me see if I can stump David here in his research.
Uh-oh.
What is the actual name of the company?
Kliegl Brothers.
The Kliegl Brothers, absolutely, because they were like the
just like us.
They were like the Lumen Brothers. They're the Kliegl Brothers.
Keep going. Their name is much longer than that.
Okay, here we go. The Kliegl Brothers, Universal Electric Stage Lighting Company.
Very good, David.
Woo, David, yeah.
I had it written down. Yes, the Universal Electric Stage Lighting Company.
People may not know, how much Kliegl Brothers contributed to our industry. I mean, they were huge. In terms of, they were dominant. If you think ETC they were the ETC of their day, and the innovations that they made, incredible.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, because America is a land and a country of immigrants, we had two Bavarian immigrants, Anton Kliegl and Johann Kliegl. Mm-hmm. And they were the ones who started. They were the brothers, and they started the company, and which became really, they were used on movie sets and in theaters, everywhere.
Klieg light is in the dictionary. The Klieg light is in the dictionary, under the Kliegs. It's a common phrase.
Yeah, it's a common phrase that was used and became part of the American, English language.
Vernacular.
Yeah, it's a vernacular, exactly. God, Stan comes up with these great words. I love it.
It's the vernacular.
It's a vernacular. Okay. Anyway, but Kliegl,
common parlance.
Kliegl was a company. When did they shut down? Is the question.
I have some knowledge about that.
Okay.
Well, I'll let you go ahead, David, since you've got
the
history.
Well, first of all, Steve posted what Steve did post, and he posted something that I sort of posted. I think maybe I posted it. Anyway, it was sort of like some old some old lighting controllers that Steve took down for some reason. He said, we're going to talk about this, so we're not going to post it. But there was a Kliegl lighting controller in the 80s, and it was called you guys remember?
Which one there was? I know a bunch of them, and I've ran some
I'm talking about their first real big memory console. It was actually...
No, I know exactly what it was.
What was it?
The Kliegl Performer 3.
Exactly. Well, actually, there was a Performer 1 and Performer 2.
Well, that probably was.
And the Kliegl Performer, and it was a direct competitor to the...
Oh, Strand Micro and Multi-Cues?
No, that's a light palette, actually. That mini light palette.
The Strand.
Right?
The Strand.
Yeah. So a lot of people used Performers. And if I remember correctly, do you remember what they stored, what the media was they stored all the cues on?
I think it was a 5 1/4 inch floppy.
Nope.
Cassette.
That's right.
Cassette. Yes, that's right. Cassette. I remember that. That's right.
A cassette.
Bill Sapsis, our friend at Bill Sapsis Rigging, does a little show called Backstage Pass. And this week, Live Design put this out. And two of my old mentors, Steve Terry, who's now at ETC, and John McGraw, basically the guys who took from Peter Forward and made a little company called Production Arts Lighting. And at Production Arts Lighting, when I was working there in the 80s, late 80s, the two primary boards that we sent around the world on national tours were Kliegl Performers and Strand Mini Light Palettes. And those guys, I recommend that our listeners watch that show. I think I posted it on the Facebook page, and you might not know those names and those guys, but since we're talking about Kliegl and people who really changed the world, Kliegl changed the world, and so did John McGraw and Steve Terry at Production Arts. Or touring would not be what it is today had it not been for them.
So, Steve, what year did Kliegl, I guess, close its doors?
Well, I think the thing about Kliegl is they were the dominant force in lighting in North America for 100 years. They were founded in 1896, and finally they were forced to close their doors in 1996 because all of a sudden there were more companies. Altman, Strand, ETC, L&E, Electro Controls. All of a sudden, this pioneer got overwhelmed by 10, 15 new manufacturers. I think the thing about Kliegl, they were among the first who came out with a ellipsoidal reflector light. They came out with a Fresnel lens. They came out with the Alzac reflector. They actually partnered with Alcoa. Their Fresnel lens, they partnered with Corning. They were an amazing company.
They were. In 1996, when they shut down, I was living in Nebraska, and I was doing consulting, and I was a lighting dealer for a while. And one of the guys that I worked with was working for Kliegl at the end. He was trying to keep it alive. I'm not going to mention names. And what happened through that guy, he eventually left Kliegl because the place was falling apart. And he ended up becoming an ETC rep, and that's how I got an ETC dealership. But it's an amazing history. That's really now, I guess, for young people, is an untold story. I mean, we remember them because when we were around, they were pretty darn. There was no ETC. It was Kliegl and Strand in the United States.
Pretty much,
right?
That's it.
Pretty much, they were the two companies that we grew up with.
And there was Capital,
right?
Capital Stage Lighting, sure, yeah. Curtis in Pennsylvania writes, I feel that sometimes I hit a wall with my lighting designs, and I need to get help up the hill. What are your tips or tricks that you use in the theater when you're stuck? It sounds like he's talking about like creative block.
Oh yeah,
and I'll just throw two out. I'll throw a practical book at you that may or may not be on our website. I think Steve put it on the website that you might want to take a look at. And then I'll sort of give you a piece of insight I got from Luc Lafortune, who lit Cirque du Soleil in their early years. So the book I would recommend is The Artist's Way, a Spiritual Guide to Higher Creativity by Julia Cameron. That's her name. And she's really sort of wrote it for writers who have writer's block, but it applies to anyone. And the really cool thing about it is after you read the book, there are a whole set of very prescriptive things that you can actually do in your life to open up those creative channels. So and it's been read by millions of artists. So I think it's got a long history, very inexpensive online to pick up a softcover copy of The Artist's Way. And the other thing I will tell you is I went to a workshop years ago. I think it was at LDI, and I really wanted to hear from Luke LaFortune, who was doing all the great Cirque work. And he told the story about how they were creating all these looks for the show. They didn't know what the show was. The show was in development. So they go in the theater, they have these lights in the air, and they create these looks and store them in memory and not really know how they were going to use them. And then he was working on, I think it was O, as he said. And he sort of, the board was upstairs. He was downstairs. He was talking through a headset. And he sort of was, because he wasn't getting anything. He was feeling stuck, like you suggest. And what he did, he said, is he went out to all the bookstores in town, and he just started buying books with beautiful imagery. Whatever it was, didn't matter. Nature photography, high art, fine art, fashion, all this stuff. And then he set them up, and he put them all around himself at the tech table, and just had them there. We could flip through them, sort of like immersed himself in that. And then he said he had the guy bring the board downstairs from the booth so he could touch them, so he could spin the dials and he could make the lights do things. And that sort of got him out of his funk. So those are my two things for you there, Curtis.
The only thing I want to say, well, besides taking an inspiration shower, don't let it get you down. And I just think sometimes you just need to get up and walk outside, you know? You just need to leave the theater for a second, you know, take a break if you can, of course. But you at least sometimes, you know, when that happens to me, it's instead of getting stuck in the weeds of technology, which is so easy to do when you're sitting at the table, get a breath of fresh air. That's what I do. You know, sometimes you need to step away. And I think a lot of it happens also when you're dealing with very long rehearsals and, you know, tech rehearsals, and you're in the theater for like 10, 12 hours or 16 hours. I'm sorry, but it's hard to see after about 8 hours. So, you know, sometimes you need some natural light. So get out there, you know, breathe the air and zen out a bit, and then come back in.
Well, you are listening to Light Talk with Steve, Stan, and David, the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by...
Well, now, our early listeners may remember Suck No More, the console add-on that makes every cue a winner. Well, just in time for the summer touring season, Suck No More Pro Edition. You know, who cares if you can't focus your way out of a paper bag? So what if you didn't select the proper lights? With Suck No More, your career will be on the fast track. Suck No More Pro Edition, it's auto-tune for lighting designers. Just load it up, stand back, and let that sucker do its thing. If you're really in a tight spot, put Suck No More Pro Edition in the 7 Deadly Sins mode. Woo. For example, tap gluttony. And watch the fireworks begin as every feature on the light will be used in just one song. Want to be better than everyone else? Then pull up Brian McDevitt Envy mode and watch the Tonys stack up. And for that encore you just can't get right, with Sloth mode, you can take a nap while Suck No More Pro Edition just makes you look good.
Yep,
Suck No More, because you need it, brother.
Yeah, that's for me.
Yep,
the sloth mode.
I need it.
The sloth mode. That's for me.
And now, back to Light Talk. Steve?
Okay, we have a question all the way from Miami, Florida. It is Joshua Gumbiner.
I know Josh. He's my pal.
I'm close to Miami right now. I'm just about 50
right
miles north.
He's
Yeah.
right around the corner
right.
from you, David.
Well, Josh says, hello, all.
Hey.
I'm trying to purchase some moving heads for a dance space with a dead hung grid at 15.6, so it's a low grid. I need brightness and decent beam spread. Also, I would like to stay in the $2,000 to $4,000 range if possible. Any recommendations? Well, I've got a couple for you. You know, $2,000 to $4,000, you're asking a lot, and you're kind of in a no man's land there. You're not at the low end of the stuff, but you're also not in that kind of sweet spot. So $2,000 to $4,000, I would say you could find some very good equipment from Philips Showline. They make a couple washes that are in that price range that are kind of spectacular. I would say American DJ.
Yep.
I think they get overlooked, and I think that name DJ turns some people off, but I think they've got some pretty good equipment in that range. Certainly, I would think Chauvet would have something. Pearl River out of China is going to have something. I believe GLP has a couple washes in that range that would work for you. There's another company out of the UK that I've done some reading on. I haven't used the equipment. It's called ProLight Concepts. But I'm going to offer you a different suggestion. And I'm going to say, what happens if you buy less equipment and you increase that price range a little bit? So I think if you look at $4,000 to, I don't know, $6,500, if you look in that range, then all of a sudden there's a lot of players who come into focus for you. Elation, high-end systems, Roby, all have some really good mid-price lights in that mid-$6,000 range, and it might be better for you in the long run to buy, say, 2 lights or 3 lights instead of 4 or 5 lights. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Now, I think those are all good recommendations. I would look at Elation. I think Elation has some lights in that range. Some really nice LED wash lights, movable light within the $2,000 to $4,000 range. I highly recommend their products.
I wasn't clear if he was talking about wash or spots or profiles. So I was thinking he was talking about profiles, and I was going to give Bobby Hale a call and say, I've been impressed with in the spot world. We put in the light lab the solar 750, which I think it's not quite. Maybe I looked at the beam angle, and I think it might be wide enough for him at 15.6. And I think they might, if you could squeeze that price range up just a little bit, like Steve is saying, it opens it up, and that's a really nice light. I mean, that's got the same light engine as my Solar Theater. It doesn't have the shutters, but it's got everything else, and that may be like he might see that for $5, guys. What do you think in that world?
No, he'll never see that for $5.
I have the answer. Again, you guys have witnessed some brilliance coming out of my mind. It happens very rarely, but I just thought of the answer. Buy some old VL1000s because you could hang them at 15 feet. You could put them on super zoom and you have nothing to worry about. There you go.
That's a good point.
You can buy them for about $800 a piece.
Well, no, you bring up a good point. Maybe you go to one of the used companies out there. I mean, and they do have a lot of older fixtures that are quite, they're in the $3,000 range. Again, it's just buyer beware.
That's right. I mean,
and you also want to be careful if you do that. Be sure that you get a light that's auto ranging, and that's not going to be necessarily true of some of the older equipment. All of a sudden, you're going to buy these lights, and it's going to take 208, and you can't run it. Yeah, so just be careful about that.
Good point. You don't think about that until you plug it in and it blows up.
What do you think the 750 the 750 is listing at, Steve?
I don't think you're going to get one for $5,000.
Yeah, I think it's going to be closer to $6,000. I really do.
I'm going to say closer to about $68,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe so.
And it depends on how many you buy. And I think it's a bargain. Subs, the 750 or the 1K sub, $7,000. That's a bargain. It's a great light.
Oh yeah.
Well, here. Okay. Look. Well, here.
But then there's a lot of companies that have lights in that range that are good.
That's right.
Well, I don't know. I'm seeing solar beams at listing at 76, and I'm seeing the solar spot 1000 show a listing at 79.
Yeah, where you knock like 15% off of that, and that's what you're going to get. So it's up there in that high $6,000 range.
Yeah, I think he's got to either. So I agree with Steve's initial point. Either you're going to have to drop it to a different level of quality, or you're going to have to bump it up, or take some of the suggestions that have been made. Yeah,
I'm going to go with David's suggestion. Go to a reputable company and buy some used equipment. That we all know there's 2 or 3 online.
Sure.
Give them a call. See what they have. It's not a foot race.
Absolutely. It's absolutely, and it's tried and true. So you may get the best bang for your buck by going that route. Hey guys, you hear that in the background? That Hammond organ solo tells us that once again you've spent a precious 40 minutes of your life listening to Light Talk. Look for the next episode of Light Talk here on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Spotify, or the Light Talk Facebook group page. And while you are there, post your comments and questions, and be sure to subscribe to Light Talk.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, don't burn down your theater.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And don't forget to keep these questions coming. You can email us at David, Stan, or Steve at lighttalk.org.
And be sure to tune in next week where we discuss the 2019 Prague Quadrennial. At what point do you stop taking electrician gigs? Now. Is stage lighting starting to overwhelm worship services? And, of course, my work looks cliche.
All that, and there'll be a new sponsor.
See you next week. Same time, same channel. Bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Nice.